Hello, everyone, and I hope you can hear me. If not, do give a sign. Thank you all very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules in order to join us here tonight as we celebrate both 15 years of Belfast Photo Festival as well as the launch of Photography and Festivals PhotoResearchers Journal number 43, which is a cooperation between the European Society for the History of Photography and Belfast Photo Festival. My name is Hanin Hannouch, and I am the curator of photography, film, and audio at Weltmuseum Wien in Vienna. And today I am reaching out to you in my capacity as the president of the European Society for the History of Photography, based here in Vienna. So before I introduce Michael and before the panel starts, I would like to briefly tell you about the Society. So not the stuff that you can read on our website, which I will put in the chat box below, but just what does this kind of work on PhotoResearcher and with Michael and on this online event means to me. So the Society started in 1978, and I have had the pleasure of being voted as its president just 2 weeks ago, succeeding Uwe Schögel, who has been its president for 12 years, which is the maximum duration of time that I could do this job. So for us, there are 3 cornerstones of our work and why we publish PhotoResearcher and seek out cooperations, such as the one with Belfast Photo Festival. And these 3 cornerstones are, for me, 3 commitments that I hold on to and that really guide my work and that of my team. First of all, we are committed to our readers, to the readership of the journal, which is why through PhotoResearcher, we like to provide avenues for reflections on photography, both from a theoretical viewpoint, such as with this special issue we had with Christoph Schaden on Photobooks, as well as more practice-based lenses, like the special edition which we created with Michael Weir as its guest editor. And in doing so, we understand that the form and content cannot be disassociated, that they should rather exist in a harmony. And for this reason, as an academic journal, we do invest quite a lot in design. And across the years, we have settled on the journal as you see it today, with this kind of Swiss binding, with 4-color prints, with full-page prints inside of it as well. And why do we do this? The reason is we want to make sure that our readers have the most pleasurable experience that they possibly can have engaging with questions about photography, its history, as well as its future. The last thing I would want is for people to want to gouge their eyes out reading texts about photography. So we do invest in the design, and we do this with the intention of offering the readers a pleasurable experience. Other than this first commitment, our second commitment is, of course, that towards our authors and our editors, and it is very much manifested by this online event today. We understand that editors, guest editors, and authors invest quite a lot of their life energy in writing texts, in reflecting upon phenomena. And for this reason, I wish to have their message be expanded well beyond the scope of the journal in the online sphere. Although I hope that the price of PhotoResearcher of 28 euros or 24 pounds is not exorbitant, despite the inflation that we're all going through today, I do recognize that this can still be too much money for some people. And it is a vision that both creating this online event is a vision that matches what I like to contribute to society, as well as Belfast Photo Festival. So creating these online events that are easy to access and for free, I hope, will offer the attendees at least some insight into what the authors have spent quite a lot of time writing and reflecting upon. So when authors work with PhotoResearcher, their articles, their contributions do not end up in some drawer in a dusty office, but we do endeavor to put them out there as much as we possibly can, as a way to value the author's work. And last but not least, the commitment of the Society is towards the history of photography and towards photography as such, understood as a continuum. Of course, we have reflected upon what does it mean to produce photo books today and back then, but also we do focus on phenomena that are still unfolding, such as with this special issue on private photo collecting. And the reason is we recognize that historians and theorists do not have the final word about photography, its history, and its trajectory. Many times, practitioners who are organizing festivals, who are actively collecting, are themselves key players who also need to have their voices heard in print media and in more academic journals. And so part of our commitment is to be very respectful and mindful of the continuum along which photography exists, and to work with various guest editors. They may come from practice or they may come from theory. It depends on the importance of the insights that they can provide into photography and what it means today and back then. So these are the commitments that we hold on to and that matter to us. And when I first got to meet Michael Weir in Belfast, so the CEO of Belfast Photo Festival, I wasn't president of the society back then, but I was quite active in it. And I noticed that we share two things. I hope that we share them and that Michael agrees. And these two aspects are, on the one hand, continuity. Belfast Photo Festival has existed for now 15 years and counting. And approachability. So despite existing within an important tradition that has managed to pivot despite all political and social changes, Belfast Photo Festival, and through Michael, really appeared to me as an approachable cooperation partner, willing to reflect, willing to try something new, thanks to or despite the decade plus that Michael and Belfast Photo Festival's team has been doing this work. Often continuity and approachability tend to be mutually exclusive. So I was very lucky to find in Michael a cooperation partner who embodies these sometimes antithetical positions. And my hunch was right. I had a blast working with Michael and his team and the authors on this special issue. And so now I will present Michael before he takes over and before we start the panel. So Michael Weir, whom I met some years ago in Vienna, has been the director of Belfast Photo Festival since 2009. Michael Weir is a contemporary art curator with a focus on photography as well as new media art. Michael Weir has delivered projects for Magnum Photos, Vogue, Dazed, and Vice. And he has collaborated with artists such as Ai Weiwei, Richard Moss, Alec Soth, Hannah Starkey, and Vivian Sesson. Michael Weir judges for numerous international awards, including the ICP Infinity Awards New York and SciFest in Bologna. And he regularly participates in international portfolio reviews across Europe and Asia, including Les Rencontres de Arles in France, Art Taipei in Taiwan, Braga Photo in Portugal, and Singapore International Photography Festival in Singapore. So Michael, thank you very, very much for the time we spent together working on this special issue. I looked forward to working with you, and it was everything that I could have imagined. And it has been a blast. So I am very happy that with this energy, we can start the event. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Hanin. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, well, I just changed the cameras here. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this issue, the festival, and just give a brief introduction so we can get cracking with the panel discussion. It was a real privilege to be invited to contribute and guest edit this special issue of the magazine. At the minute, the Belfast Photo Festival continues to support photographers through awards, commissions, exhibitions, publications, and promotions, as we've done for the past 15 years. we produce exhibitions and events utilizing both indoor and outdoor spaces, and like to see ourselves as becoming specialists somewhat in outdoor spaces and presentation of photography throughout and within the city. And every year we're always attempting to, I guess, reinvent ourselves in some sense, to challenge ourselves and look at the traditional gallery in a new way, through our exhibitions and through our programs, in an attempt to make our programs more accessible to people, as well as our events, and also to inspire, surprise people as well, and drive ourselves forward as we are always keen to innovate in how we produce and exhibit and display photography. Every year we do carry inspiration and influence from previous editions. Of course, that's only natural to do that, is to learn from what you've done before. And we increasingly look at photography and its convergence with other art forms. Photography as a medium of truth, such as editing, doctoring, and misuse of the photographic image. Playful interactive photography, and in the issue, if you see it, we look back at the piece Jump Trump that we brought over with Eric Kessels back in 2019, actually while Donald Trump was on tour in Ireland, which became a bit of a statement piece. And environmental photography is something that we look at continuously every year as well, and artistic collaborations with the AI a bit more recently. So Hanin's just holding up the magazine there. Basically, at Belfast Photo Festival, we do feel a sense of responsibility, as I'm sure many festival organisers do these days. We're living in a very precarious and a very challenging, changing world. For us, it's important that we facilitate discourse and affect progress around issues relating to the challenges of our time. And we understand that on a daily basis, we don't know, while they're in front of our eyes, we don't always truly see them, and often feel powerless when we do. And by taking these subjects on, we hope to empower people. This year, we've brought our focus to the biosphere, and in particular to our natural heritage and environment, and particularly the natural heritage and environment of Northern Ireland through 4 major commissions, which are presented as exhibitions both in Belfast City as well as across Northern Ireland, and events as well. And we partnered with PhotoResearcher on this publication, as for us it was a milestone. 15 years is a milestone for any company, for any organization, and we really wanted to honor the festival's legacy, and take a moment as well, I guess, to reflect on the medium, the festival, where we've come from and where we're going, to invite thoughts and contributions from individuals who have dedicated their lives to photography and festivals, some of who you're going to hear from today, to encourage academic reflection on the phenomenon of photography and festivals, and hopefully as well, ideally, to inspire future generations. The approach of each article was chosen particularly because, for me, they each represent strands that we consider when we're building the festival. For example, partnerships and collaborations with galleries, and in this particular instance, with regards to the magazine and Hannah Crowley's contribution, our collaboration with museums, and particularly the Ulster Museum, the festival's place and integration and relationship to the city, which of course is extremely important, the impact and sustainability of photo festivals on their environment, which is something we're increasingly consciously aware of, and the importance of visual activism, and the role of photography festivals in that, as well as the future of photography festivals, and how every year we strive to remain current and to remain relevant. But to get the panel started, to get the discussion going, I'd like to introduce Louise Clements, who we chose to write the afterword for this issue of PhotoResearcher, and this is due to her years of dedication and contribution to the medium, the unique perspectives that she brings to the dynamics, ecosystems, and impacts of working with and directing photography festivals in the UK and internationally, and particularly in her role as founder of Format Festival, and now her role as Director of PhotoWorks in Brighton. So I would like to welcome Louise and also the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you, Hanin, and thank you all of our lovely guests. I know you're out there, although we can't see you due to the wonderful phenomenon of Zoom. As Michael kindly said, I'm the director of PhotoWorks, where I lead the strategic vision and creative and practical direction of the organisation. We've been around for 30 years. We organise publications, residencies, the PhotoWorks Festival in Brighton, which we're working towards for an edition at the end of 2026. So we're currently very much alive and researching new models for that. We have programs all across the UK and internationally. And as Michael said, I've worked in various different places, including Forestry England. We're leading on the contemporary art programme across 1,500 forests for the national perspective, and 20 or so years at Quad, a Centre for Contemporary Art and Film, and Format Festival, which we founded in 2004, which was a really fundamental year for the development and growth of collaborative and participatory photography worldwide. So I'm grateful to Hanin and Michael for inviting me to create the Afterword for the edition, which was no small feat to achieve after all the great contributions, to moderate this super panel. So I'm confident on saying on behalf of our panelists here today that we're generally grateful for having this shared platform to talk about what we do and debate our context of photography festivals, which is a very specific context, and we're living in a dynamic one. We're all involved in various degrees of leadership and the creation and direction and discernment of the programs, and we've all had a responsibility to be developmental in our approach and address social change, listen to our audiences, attempting to be good ancestors with solidarity, and that's key as we hope to build a better future environmentally, socially and economically. So the format of the panel today is that we'll hear from Hannah Crowdy, Toby Smith and Tom Seymour. With Michael and myself, we'll pitch in if there's any tiny moments of gaps, and Hanin will close the session in summary. So I've got the pleasure to introduce our panel. We have Hannah Crowdy, who's based in Belfast. Hannah's head of the curatorial department at the National Museums of Northern Ireland, and has played a leading role in major projects such as the Titanic exhibition, Ulster Transport Museum, and the Troubles Beyond exhibition, and a whole range of fantastic exhibitions. You're also a Brighton native and moved to Belfast. And you've been working for around 18 or so years. Her text tackled new resonances in museum collections, the Ulster Museum and Belfast Photo Festival. So what we're going to ask our panelists to do in turn, so we'll ask Hannah to speak first, and then we'll come to Tom, and then we'll come to Toby, and I'll introduce them each as we go through, is for each of our panelists to to talk in summary about a key abstract or essence of take-home points from their texts. So we'll start with Hannah.
Thank you very much, Louise. I must say I feel a little bit of a fraud being here. I'm not an expert in photography, and the museums I work in, we're not photography museums. For those that don't know, National Museums Northern Ireland is for major museums across Northern Ireland. We're responsible for 1.4 million objects, everything from entomology to transport to costume, so very diverse collections. But the focus of my article was really our work with the Ulster Museum and the Belfast Photo Festival. And Michael talked a lot there about partnership, and I would say that as an organisation, almost all of our work, and certainly our very best work, is generated through partnership. So it's really important to us. And the Belfast Photo Festival has been a fantastic and really natural partner for us. It's the only festival amongst many festivals that's purely dedicated to the visual arts in Belfast. So we operate as the National Museum and the National Gallery. And so, as I say, a very natural partner. And what I wanted to say here really was all about challenging perceptions, is why we feel that we like to work with the Belfast Photo Festival, and what I hope I feel I explore in my article. So some of the perceptions that we're trying to challenge are this idea that museums are just venues, they're just these big spaces. I think that's one of the reasons that they are attractive to festivals, because they are very established. The Ulster Museum has existed in some form at its current place since 1929. Also, we have a lot of footfall. We're the third most visited institution in Northern Ireland. But there are many layers to what we do. There's our collections, our research and expertise, and our practice. And working with a festival is a real chance to explore this in lots of very innovative ways. The other thing is museums are as much about looking forward as looking back. That may be obvious to everyone in this audience, but it's something that we feel isn't always well understood. We're not these kind of staid, dusty institutions full of unchanging displays. We exist in, and we are influenced by, and we contribute to wider society. We're spaces where people can come and share perspectives on where we are today and what this might mean for our futures. And one of the examples I use in my article is the Hannah Starkey collaboration with the Belfast Photo Festival back in 2023. It was to mark the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And there was an element of looking back in that, obviously, to reflect on that time and where we've come from. But really, it was a lot about being very forward thinking, prompting discussion about the role of women in politics and society, particularly in leadership positions, and trying to encourage further debate and discussion about that. And then finally, again, about challenging perceptions, our collections really are a living resource. They're not just to be viewed or just to transfer knowledge. They really are there to inspire and challenge. And I think Michael again had a comment there about facilitating discourse and affecting progress is something festivals do. It's very much what we do in the museums. And again, that's a good reason for us to work together. So 2 examples in the article with the Japanese photographer, Kensuke Koike, I hope I pronounced that okay, who used our collections really as a resource, as inspiration, and reinterpreted them in creative new ways. That was back in 2023. And then in 2022, in an exhibition called Against the Image, again in collaboration with the Belfast Photo Festival, the Now You See Me Moria collection of photographs about raising awareness of life in what was the largest refugee camp in Europe on Lesbos. And really that links very much with our own work on what we would call inclusive global histories, which is our program of decolonization, and helping to spark these new conversations on priority themes for us as museums, such as displacement of people, identity, and racism. So it's been a real joy to work with the Photo Festival. 2009, it's an auspicious year to me. It's when I arrived in Northern Ireland, but more importantly, the Ulster Museum had gone through a major redevelopment and reopened in 2009. And I think working with the festival is always very energizing. It always kind of prompts us to think differently, work differently, and make new connections. And I hope that's something I've got across in my article.
Thank you so much, Hannah. We will come back with more questions as we go through. And for the audience, if you would like to put your questions in the Q&A section of that you can find in the bottom bar of Zoom, please do so. And if you can't work that, put them in the chat and we'll find them there as well. So next up, I'd like to introduce Tom Seymour. Tom is an independent journalist and lecturer specializing in art with over 15-year career. He's collaborated with some of the world's leading media outlets and has won numerous industry awards. So he's currently working as a London correspondent for Cultured and is editorial consultant to Culture Shock, regularly contributing to Freeze, the art newspaper, Art View, Sight and Sound, ArtNet, among others. I'm sure you've bumped into his writing and has written a really incredibly comprehensive piece within the journal as well. So the text that you've submitted focused on the future of photography festivals, a British-Irish perspective, but it's got much broader relationships in society and in the context of our field as well. Can you talk about the key messages, questions, provocations within your piece in summary, Tom?
Of course, yeah. And thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Yeah, I tried to look at the big questions facing for the future of photography right now in, this disruptive period of time when AI is, coming into our field and really sort of questioning the kind of very basic idea of whether photography will remain a camera-based sort of medium, and the role that festivals can play in that. But I wanted to start, I sort of orientated the article around a very kind of treasured anecdote I've um, that I've got, which is attending about 10 years ago now, attending the Belfast Photo Festival with Juno Calypso, who's a photographer who's gone on to develop a real profile for herself. But I think I was the first journalist to ever write an article about her when she won a prize at a British Journal of Photography in the early noughties, over 10 years ago now. Um, and because I knew Juno a little bit, we kind of hung out together in Belfast, and she showed me her phone, and a bunch of like young kids, she had no idea who these people were, had flown into Belfast from the Republic of Ireland, and were incredibly excited to meet her, and had been tagging her on social media when they were flying in into Belfast, and they kind of approached her quite nervously. But we ended up having this like wonderful evening with people from Belfast, people from the Republic. Belfast is famous for its, I mean, the photo festival, and Belfast city is famous for its parties, I guess. So, I had a really, really fantastic time. And I wrote in the piece that, this sort of attractive like girl from East London who'd gone to America and taken photographs of herself in a bath full of milk had like somehow made the kind of the violent history of Belfast for an evening at least seem completely um like a distant memory and like an alien experience. And I kind of it that and it sounds quite flippant, but it genuinely felt to me like that moment was a sort of microcosm for how photography has this, and art in general has this genuine capacity to kind of like bring people together, and to kind of make people step out of their lives sometimes, and connect with each other. So I kind of orientated the article around that memory, and looked, more closely into the foundings of Belfast Exposed and the Belfast Photo Festival. Belfast Exposed was, which is just around the corner from where we celebrated that night, from where the festival is orientated, was founded in 1983, at the height of the Troubles, by someone, a local trade unionist, who Danny Burke, who basically like did an open call, and he invited people from all over Belfast to sort of share photos of their lives. The idea was that like he wanted to kind of show a working class experience of Belfast, which transcended sectarian boundaries. And I sort of looked further into not just the origins of Belfast Photo Festival, but also of contemporary photography in Belfast as a whole. Like Belfast is a place that's obviously been mediated through press photography, through mainstream media organizations, and the actual development of contemporary photography in the city, which is in some respects led to Belfast Photo Festival, was a kind of a key marker of my article. But we have to remember that contemporary photography is still something that has largely been ignored by the mainstream art world. I write a lot about the kind of the art market now, and the museum sector, and the kind of like mainstream thing that we call the art world. And it wasn't until I think 2001, from memory, 2002, that um, a major institution in the UK ran a photography only exhibition, and that was Dido Moriyama at Tate Modern. If I'm wrong on that, then please correct me. But that, from my understanding, that was the first time that a major major institution to put on an exhibition of photography, which seems crazy. Um, so, we're talking about still a very, very new medium, which has only really come into like public consciousness, you know, relatively speaking, very recently. But you know, what I sort of explored in the article is the fact that even in the 1970s, Susan Sontag was writing about the pollution of photography, the fact that, you know, images had like you know, visual pollution, she said that images were sort of like sucking fatigue and empathy away from our culture. This is decades before Instagram. And she was talking about the fact that imagery was sort of dulling emotional responses and critical thought. And then ever since, you know, we've had social media, we've had a kind of era of unprecedented image making. People create billions of images every day, I think now. You know, it's seen as so normal to get your phone out and take photos. So what does that mean for contemporary fine art photography, for people that are trying to do this as a job? And where does photo festivals, what are their role in that, essentially? I also looked at the fact that only 8.4% of photography workers in the UK are from working class background. And London, where I'm from now, I'm from the north of England, but I live in London. That still dominates funding, access, education, visibility. You know, there are 91 UK universities that offer 184 photography-related courses now. So the kind of London centricness of it is beginning to change, but you know, the barriers to gaining visibility and making any money out of this gig is still very London centric. And I think photography festivals have an absolutely massive role to play in that, because they allow people to network, they allow people to get their work in front of industry figures through things like portfolio reviews. You know, they lead to commissions, they lead to representation, they lead to careers. This is all very good. But you know, what I looked at is that the World Photography Awards, when Boris Eggleton stood up and told everyone that a photo of it had just won a massive prize, judged by industry figures, was actually made with a laptop and access to an AI piece of software. A lot of us use AI in our daily lives and in our work situations, sort of almost day to day now. That is only going to dramatically accelerate, I think. So I started to sort of explore the role that festivals can have in this period of extreme disruption. You know, I looked at exhibitions like Electric Dreams at the Tate. I think it's still on at the Tate. And if you go to Paris, there was a big show at the Pompidou about surrealism recently. You know, these are celebrations of artists that were huge disruptors of their time. They did not sort of like maintain a status quo in any way. They were looking to disrupt massively. So I think, you know, photographers of our age, particularly the successful ones, will be looking to disrupt what photography has been, to try and like embrace new technologies and new understandings of the medium. So I think it's maybe something we should embrace, and festivals are a key part of that. So yeah, very, very big questions, but to round off, I think we need, you know, better funded regional hubs, accessible training, transparent gatekeeping, and I think photography festivals offer that, and will hopefully continue to offer that in the future. A kind of hybrid future where physical and digital and local, international, traditional, and AI enhanced can meet as one. And yeah, thanks ever so much for your time. I welcome any questions.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much. It's really, really incredible. We will get to those questions. I just realize our time is racing through, and we are aware that we have some really incredible experts in the audience as well. So please do send some provocations, talk about failings, talk about, you know, examples of best practice, share some links in the chat as well for the organizations that you're representing, and share some links to, you know, incredible experiences that you've had in other festivals, or things that could be done better. You know, hopefully we can aggregate some thoughts from our amazing audience as well. So next up, we also have a great speaker. We have lovely Toby Smith, who's based in UK and Belfast, charting both territories. You've got over 15 years of experience the photography industry. You have a focus on positive social and environmental impact, particularly innovation in public engagement concerning the environment, equity and participation. I have a MA in photography from LCC and have been and still are a practitioner yourself. But also have a career as a photojournalist with the Gessi, National Geographic, Guardian, BBC, and have had exhibitions at places such as the V&A National History Museum in Vienna, Somerset House, and has led the Climate Visuals project in building global image library. So for the publication, you've written a festivals as climate protest and opportunity ? Article, and I'm looking forward to you articulating that through your summary and questions and provocations. Over to you.
Thanks, Louise, Hanin, Michael, everyone for having me. I'm going to rattle through a bit of an abstract here because I'm looking forward to a discussion with some of these amazing panelists. So yeah, I'm here representing the Belfast Photo Festival, but I think this article came out of a little bit of a kind of biographic fusion and wanting to be a bit playful and challenge myself and maybe challenge photography as well. As Louise touched on, in a rough summary, I've had a wonderful career that spanned photojournalism, campaign and investigation. And 8 years ago, I mostly laid up the camera and started working in the heart of a climate focused organization, bringing and developing a photography project within that. And then almost 2 years ago, I was really pleased to come back into the heart of photography and start working with Michael and the festival team. And I'm really proud that this year's edition has a major environmental theme. And I've probably had a little bit to do with taking us in that direction. I've really enjoyed that. I think what used to motivate me and a lot of photographers is potentially a romantic ideal that photography can change the world. And I don't want to burst that optimism, but sometimes that kind of romantic crusade can often not be that effective. And I think in the early part of my career, I was guilty of that kind of energy and ignorance. And it's been really lovely to see the wider photography sector and journalism really start to focus on social and environmental impact at the heart of what they do, rather than it being a buzzword or just for audience figures. I really feel executives and people on the right side of history are emerging and showing leadership. In my article, I started to look across different genres of photography, the history of photography in media, and try and pull out some key examples of where photography has been really effective around what I'll call environmental impact, as in creating positive change, whether that's climate, ecology, or pollution. So there's a few kind of points there where I think are really significant. I think the Brownie camera, I always point out that I love tipping points in society. I view that's one as kind of slightly making photography more accessible to people. Another technological invention that I think is fascinating with regards to shortly after the Brownie camera is the earliest examples of social impact photography, documenting the crises of homelessness around New York. A huge leap forward to the blue marble moment, when the Apollo mission first beamed a picture of our entire planet back to TV screens around the US and around the world, and looking back on ourselves as this insignificant human on a big blue marble was often referenced as founding the start of many of the environmental movements as well. I'm quite fascinated personally about watching how different campaign and advertising organizations or civil society organizations use photography. I love, but also kind of hate, and I think that it represents also people's polarized reactions to things like the XR, Just Stop Oil, and Insulate Britain's kind of theatrical strategy with photography. I think that's really effective for some people and really ineffective for others. I personally see massive impact where photography is a medium that's interdisciplinary and can be the kind of combination point or the fertile space that exists between different sectors, whether that's science, art, policy, diplomacy, and media. And I think photography's universal accessibility is a really nice glue that can pull these different sectors together and find something new. I think when it comes to environmental stewardship and photography, it's any opportunity to repeat how photography has a real critical failure around representation, whether that's different elements of intersectionality or ethnicity or even gender in 2025. Photography is still an extremely gendered kind of platform. It's often controlled by media gatekeepers with corporate interests, or the algorithms of social media platforms, with also kind of taxpayer stock price interests as well. And I think when we're thinking about photography, and I'm going to get to the protest part soon, we should think about, I think, how photography is often either deliberately or just as a kind of consequence of where our funding comes from, it's often forced and stuck in a colonial system of media, a colonial system of funding, and there's conventions in photography that have grown from that are stubborn and deep-rooted that I really don't think are helpful to the medium, especially when it comes to environmental social impact. It's also a matter of, kind of, as Tom said, I think I love the Belfast Photo Festival because it has that opportunity to level up the sector. All of the exhibitions are free and often in public spaces. And I think that is a really good and efficient way of using what is, we admit, poor proportional funding in Northern Ireland to, hopefully present and surprise people with some really strong imagery. And in doing that as well, we need to, I'm going to end on a positive note, we need to focus on more solutions imagery. There's so much negative clickbait because of the way it generates an emotional response to people and energizes people. And that does sell clicks, and that sells newspapers, magazines, exhibitions, and headlines. But solutions imagery, images of things going well or being positive, are much more salient and much more likely to cause people to have a long-term positive response. So, kind of in summary of all that, and back to the title of the article, I often feel like, how can we potentially be more protest in our photography? How can we pretend our funder wouldn't care? How can we break down white cube norms? How can we, I think photography should stop being so conservative and sometimes, in my opinion, a bit boring, and actually take energy and activism into how it operates and is delivered and is exhibited, and get out of its 6x4 and 6x6 ratios and do something more interesting. It's a thought experiment because in most of the roles of my career, we've been governed by structures that don't let that happen. But it's nice to think about that as a platform for discussion. Let's hope we have a good one.
Navigating back online. Thank you, Toby. Thank you so much. That's an incredible thought to navigate around and practice within. And we talk about this. There's lots of different points that we've all made in different ways, isn't there? And there's some kind of key thoughts around visual literacy. It's the opportunity for festivals to provide platforms for diverse platform voices and perspectives, the opportunity to facilitate intercultural dialogue, on a very local level, economic impact for festivals, for cities, the importance for pipelines for development and growth for individuals to see a pathway into a creative career, and for local tourism and small businesses. We were talking earlier about hotels and the other kind of elements of festival going around, eating and drinking and dancing and socializing and staying, but also how do festivals have a real impact on the locale. I wanted to go back to Hannah and have I suppose a few more thoughts on your perspective about the impact and the role of the collaboration with the Photography Festival on commissioning, on local engagement, on diversification of perspectives on history and the collection potentially within the museum as well.
Yeah, I think there was a really nice comment in Tom's article, actually, in the journal, saying festivals position photography as a medium of expression, not a disposable product of mass culture. And I think that's what museums are. We're not ephemeral. We're very much about the record, about the long term, about future generations. And so by working with Photo Festival, so naturally, the main way we would work together would be with exhibitions. And as I say, Michael and the team have such great insights, such great connections. They help us work with artists that may have not been on our radar. They help us kind of consider the collections in different ways. And then we are always looking about what does this mean for us? Yes, it's great to have this exhibition and get new people in to appreciate photography and hopefully appreciate the museum in a different way. But what does that mean for us? And so in museums, we would talk about what we call developing the collection, and a lot of that is around acquisitions. And we really want to remain relevant. We want to be more representative of what's happening in the world and our diverse society. Helped us in collect in that way. So I mentioned the Now You See Memoria based on the experiences in the refugee camp. And we collected those for the permanent collection. They're now on display in a gallery where we explore world cultures, we explore decolonization, and we talk about anti-racism. And we're trying to encourage more empathy for different people's experiences. So they're a really powerful piece that has brought a lot to our collection and is helping people kind of see it in different ways and bring that very contemporary perspective.
Thank you. Can I welcome all of our guest speakers to bring their videos back on so we feel more collective. I just wanted to also pass over to Tom just to talk about the idea of gatekeepers and how we can be better at sharing the keys and thoughts on breaking down the glass ceiling, and any examples or kind of perspectives on kind of practice that you've kind of witnessed that has been productive on that front.
I don't think gatekeepers are going to go anywhere anytime soon, frankly. You know, it would be nice to imagine that they do, and we kind of like the photography industry and arts in general become more sort of democratic and accessible and inclusive and so on. And you know, that over the last few years, there's been a lot of focus on inclusivity. There's obviously been a significant backlash against that whole conversation as well. I was listening to a podcast earlier today by Naomi Ree, who's now the editorial director of ArtNet, very significant arts publication based in London. She started at ArtNet only, I mean, less than a decade ago as an intern, an unpaid intern, and has sort of managed to get a entry-level job there and has worked as an editorial director in the space of 10 years. Very impressive woman. And she spoke really really well about this this topic. She spoke about how one can navigate the gatekeeper question, and a lot of it is just about having confidence in yourself, persevering, and having belief in your own ideas, basically. And if you keep on sending the right emails to the right people, if you keep on managing to somehow get your face in front of people, if you keep on expressing interesting ideas about this thing that we're all interested in and love, then you know you will get attention from gatekeepers, and those gatekeepers will allow you into the door, or whatever the metaphor is, and you'll have a career out of it. But you know, I don't think it's something that we could be naive about. Gatekeepers exist. They actually fulfill a function in some respects, because there needs to be a kind of quality control aspect to this. But you know, then there are ways to navigate it without pulling the whole system down, I'd say.
But also, I'm always fascinated by collectives or collective practice, or individuals who chart their own territory and hold space, and then you know, kind of the professionals find the artists through their own in different ways and different terms, rather than trying to go towards opportunities, creating ecosystems and opportunities, and collaborating and commanding space to find a different way to do things. We put a lot of energy and thought into access and different dimensions of access in Photoworks and our open calls, and the way that we share interview questions in advance. For example, we try to build in the time frame before the platform opens, so that we can have dialogue around ways of approaching, because not everybody has open call experience, or can edit their selection in the best way possible. So we kind of do as much information sharing and coaching in the run up to opportunities that we offer. We really consider access riders for artists that are selected, as well as the professionals that we work with. We're doing quite a bit of thinking around access to culture at home as well. And I inherited from Shware the festival in a box model, which was a distributed participatory edition of the festival that initially started during lockdown, but then continued on for another edition post-lockdown. That's been incredible, and it's been very collaborative, and it's enabled the exhibition and program to tour internationally and find lots of different ways of participating and collaborating. Also thinking quite a bit on citizen ownership and collaboration within program planning as well. There's no great simple answer to that, but there's lots of practicing occurring around the country and internationally. So we're quite alive with trying to approach that and bear it out into practical physical program as well as clarity of access for visitors and so on. And Toby, I just wanted to come back to you in terms of social change and visual literacy, and thoughts on moments where that's been successful or had most traction, I suppose, through photography festivals or working with images in public space, and whether it's on digital platforms and or in a festival context.
Yeah, I think I was desperate to come in on Tom's point as well, gatekeepers. I think there's a segue between the two here. I think maybe because of my time at Climate Visuals, or just in general, I think when you look at the analytics of how much photography is distributed around social media platforms, the new gatekeepers are the algorithms, and it adds such a value and importance of independent outlets, whether that's journalism or arts and culture organizations or festivals, because yes, there's gatekeepers that occupy the roles within them, but they have that sense of independence and curation on behalf of their audiences and the themes they represent. But I think the ones that cut through, to answer your question, Louise, are often almost accidental. And there's one that I really love and there's a few examples I love, where media programs, whether it be film or natural history documentaries, accidentally create these incredible tsunamis or spikes in public interest and change and public behavioral change. And the one that I find has come full circle is in the Blue Planet 2, David Attenborough kind of broke the seal on the BBC taking a stance on environmental action. But he didn't do it as a deliberate move. The BBC was very vanilla in its natural history programming, but he just talked about the kind of problems of plastic pollution and what are quite cliched but really impactful images of the effect of plastic pollution having on seabirds and turtles. And it created an entire sector of plastic pollution campaign and NGOs and funding and philanthropy acting on a new part of ocean stewardship, which is plastic waste. And that has continued and and also drove viewing figures. Like the spike of people's interest in that part of the film was the highest for the whole series. It was the behind the scenes bit at the end. So then catalyzed an enormous change in how the BBC and David Attenborough programmed things. And the bit about there that I think is also key is he's one of the most trusted messengers on the planet in how he curates and what he presents. And we listen to him in collaboration with the incredible visuals. And it spurred an entire long chain of stewardship there that then in social media and in a viral form beat the gatekeepers. It didn't matter how much money Coca-Cola spent on advertising, more people were interested in plastic pollution on Instagram, right? And things like that I think are so disruptive at scale, they make my spine tingle, and no advertising agency can almost plan them. There's these nice virality moments that happen in visual culture. And photography, I think, is still the medium that possesses and generates those as well. Another one, which is, I think, pretty is the George Floyd movement and the I Can't Breathe iconography as a kind of modern piece of imagery that transcended all sorts of different sectors of media and created and gave strength and power to the Black Lives Matter movement at the time. Not always in a positive way, some tokenistic work, but yeah, these single moments that cut through the noise and beat all the advertising spent on social media, they make me really excited.
Thank you. I've got a question for Michael, but I also want to invite Hanin back into our team, which has got a question to ask as well.
So do I go first or Michael goes first?
You go first. You join.
Okay. Well, I have both a comment and a question. And the comment is, when it comes to diversity, the odds are nothing is going to change if the teams stay the same. So to what extent can the work of an institution or a festival or an artist be inclusive if the people behind the project are part of what in German is referred to as the social majority? So, and then so diversity is not just about the output, but it's also about the process. And of course, the current social polarization, which both Tom and Toby mentioned extensively, and with Brexit, with visas being even more difficult than usual, it is becoming increasingly difficult for people outside, from the so-called global south, to even move to Europe in order to be able to have these more inclusive projects, or projects that are inclusive in the process. For example, just to give you numbers and be empirical about it, Germany does have a colonial history, and I used to live there. And so any kind of work on the Namibia genocide instigated during the German colonial period, which would involve cooperation partners from Namibia, these things were welcomed in terms of funding. This being said, getting a visa from Namibia to Germany had a waiting period of around 1 year. So how do we so the question, and this may be a bit rhetorical, so how to manage institutions wanting diversity on the one hand with the political reality, with the realpolitik, that makes approaching diversity beyond tokenism increasingly difficult. So this is, the first question. And the second question I wanted to address to everyone in the room, actually, which is, especially when Toby said photography as protest and the importance of photography and protest. What happens to photography when it becomes part of the museum? So can photography, be it of protest or with any kind of political edge, retain the political edge if it's part of an institution such as a museum, which may or may not be the edgiest cultural actor in the city? So a lot of what we have discussed so far is about how can photography change society, but then how was photography changed by the institutions hosting it? So these are my questions.
Would you like to choose someone to start from? Which one?
Go for it.
Michael, are you happy to talk about I suppose international collaboration and local relationships and the long tail of organizing festivals in terms of authentic developmental collaborations with diverse participants and leaders in terms of developing the program?
Yeah, I suppose we are always conscious of how diverse and accessible the festival is. Certainly with our judging through our open submission, it isn't just us that kind of puts together the program. It really is a collaborative effort. I think that's really important to mention. Even initially, we don't even make public a theme, because we want it to be so open. We want people to put forward to us and to the judges, of which we always try to ensure that they're diverse and representative in a global context, but that they're able to put forward projects and around topics that they're passionate about, and that helps to keep it current and relevant as well. And we find that there's often like a golden thread that kind of runs through like a global consciousness of what photographers and artists care about and are thinking about and want to photograph. That's our kind of open submission into things, but I guess but then there's also the collaboration with the galleries and museums, and it is very much a collaborative process. We put often projects forward to them, and they put projects forward to us. Certainly Northern Ireland is not the most culturally diverse place in the world. I think for a long time people were afraid to come here because of the troubles. But we do every year work more and more with bodies that represent people from various backgrounds that are moving into the city. The city is becoming more culturally diverse, and we do try to bring our program to areas of the city that are particularly culturally diverse, and ensure that in some way that those exhibitions relate to those people and are guided somewhat by people from those backgrounds. So yeah, there's always ways we can improve. You know, you can never be perfect, but I think it's being aware of the problem, and being aware that that it needs addressed, and that we can always continuously improve and be more accessible, and be more representative as well.
Anna, have you had some opportunity to think about the the question around representation within the museum, and also the position of collecting the photography?
I was curious if Hannah wanted to answer that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go at the. I think it's a really interesting question about sort of that political edge and protest and what happens to that when it comes into an institution. And I think especially for an institution like us, our organisation is National Museums of Northern Ireland. National is always a very loaded term. Northern Ireland's a very loaded term. There's kind of complexity to that. There's expectation that comes with that. There's still a lot of people, when again just talking about challenging perceptions, there's a lot of people that because we have national in our name, they think we're all about promoting the state ideology, which we're absolutely not. We have complete curatorial independence in what we do, and that's enshrined in our ethics policy. We don't represent the state or any kind of political ideology. But I think it is a valid point that that kind of protest used to sit completely separately from museums, certainly museums in the UK. And for a while, I'd say that was possibly a good thing in Northern Ireland. Like during the Troubles, the Ulster Museum didn't engage in debate and discussion about that, and as such was viewed as quite an oasis, as a bit of an escape from the conflict. But as we move further away from the Good Friday Agreement, we are engaging much more in kind of contemporary discourse, and I think we are trying to collect the now, as we would call it, and try and be much braver. One of our organizational values is being courageous, and we think to do that we have to kind of put our head above the parapet and welcome protest in our spaces, including protest that is challenging us and our practice. And I think a lot of that is about building trust with those who do have different kind of viewpoints, and are seeking to be activists and are seeking to protest. And just to give one example, it's not photography specifically, but we collected the Turner Prize winning artwork by Array. They won back in 2021. They're a collective based in Belfast, and their artwork is very much activist art. It is about protest, and it has taken a lot to build up their trust that that it came into the collection, but then the responsibility that comes with that. How are we sharing that with our audiences? How do we ensure that it's their voice still coming through, not our voice as an institution? We've got a major exhibition coming up next year, Artist as Activist, which I think will contain photography, will contain different mediums of art. So it's something we're trying to embrace, and it's always that careful balance to allow those voices to come through, but ensure that the museum remains a genuinely shared space where people do feel safe and welcome, that nobody feels kind of attacked or persecuted. So it's improving, but I think there's probably still a way to go in museums.
Toby.
I think there's a word I want to kind of put into answer Hanin, both of Hanin's kind of questions and challenges, is the concept of true co-design, not tokenistic co-design, but you know, they're invariably, and I've been in this position and wanted to be challenged more in a very small team running a project, is had to invite early in and also fund the presence of people involved in the co-design that really have then the agency to change the earliest part of the project and shape the output and be involved in that in a way that's meaningful for them and the community or intersectionality they represent. And I think similarly, like with that co-design, you kind of decentralize the ownership of that content. You get rid of the idea of the name of the artist or who owns it. If it's co-designed and produced with a body of work or a single piece of imagery with protest or political change at its heart, if it's co-designed and produced in collaboration, spanning a number of different, I'm going to say authors because I can't think of a better word on the spot, then it retains its political edge, because the way in which it's used and interpreted and viewed and held and valued that can be held and viewed and valued in a museum context by the museum's audiences, but it can still be cherished and repeated and replicated for the community or authors that produced it. And that's one of the things I like about photography, is it's not a single object that's going to be interred into a collection and not breathe. It will be able to exist in another form and be repeated and printed. And that's what makes me excited about the medium, is it can't be boxed into a museum if we so choose, unless we so choose it to be.
I have a question for Tom, maybe, if that's okay with you, Louise.
Yes.
Tom, what are some strategies which you have seen artists use or photographers use to maintain the protest and the political edge of their work, even or especially when they're part of very classical institutions? Like, I'm thinking White Cube, a museum that looks like a temple with stairs, and then you go to the inside of the museum and you see protest photography. So what are some tools you have seen artists use to retain the political edge in these kinds of spaces?
I think, particularly over the last few years, you've seen particularly pioneering curators who have done an incredibly good job of unearthing names from the history of photography that were completely forgotten and passed over and just weren't part of the canon at all, basically. And those curators have often painstakingly managed to, bring these people back into the light, and in doing so have managed to sort of almost completely reform our understanding of significant periods of history, of particular social political events, of geographies and so on. To give you a case study, I interviewed a curator of a new exhibition in San Francisco called Queer Lens, and it was about essentially the history of trans photography. And this included him going through, government archives of images that had been essentially sort of seized by the American Postal Service. This is in the 1950s, because they'd managed to sort of find photographs that were being sent across America in the Postal Service from people in love with each other, from lovers, and they were sending, nude pictures, essentially, like erotic pictures, like people send selfies to each other all the time. I've certainly done so. And these things were like basically seized and held by the government. And he's managed to sort of get those back. So he's kind of, that's an act of resistance in itself, and he's put them into a museum space, So I think, there are plenty of artists doing disruptive things right now, but I think the kind of the cutting edge of what you're talking about is actually coming from curatorial attitudes, rather than contemporary artists, from my point of view. And certainly in photography, I think that's true as well. I think that's particularly true to our medium.
Thank you so much. We're getting close to running over time, I think. Is that right? Hanin, are you happy to summarize? And but certainly there's definitely more to talk about. We have hardly scratched the surface. I think we need to dedicate an entire day or more to these conversations in the future. And obviously there's the incredible publication that you can read more deeply into all of the contributions, and with more texts by others as well within that, and also visit the festival, come and sign up to our mailing list at Photoworks, and check out all the great programs of our colleagues here as well.
Perfect. If there aren't any questions, then I'm happy to summarize what I felt really resonated with me, and I hope will resonate very much with the attendees. The best work that museums can put out is cooperative. Museums are not just venues, and they can and are sexy for festivals, especially when they put their resources at the disposal, their collections at the disposal of artists, and as a resource for them to create new works or works that engage with the museum's collections. Contemporary photography remains somewhat ignored by the art world, and which begs the question of what will happen to it as society gets more and more polarized, and what role can festivals adopt in the polarized society that we are in and that we will continue to be living in. There is a clear erosion of the third space, and this is where festivals can really be an anchor to provide people with this very important dimension to their lives, one that is not, hopefully not susceptible to capitalist consumerism. What happens when photography moves away from a mere aesthetic medium meant for the pleasure of the eye and the soul to a medium that is actively shaping visibility in society through protest? And what I retain is the new gatekeepers are the algorithms. They may be there for quality control, but then what kind of quality are they actually controlling? Is kind of the rhetorical question that I would like to leave you all with.
Thank you so much. Michael, would you like to bring us to a close?
Yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for your time and energy contribution to this very special issue. I would encourage everyone to pick up a copy, of course, but we will in the in the coming weeks be releasing one or two of the articles as well, just to give people an idea of their content. And I think the cover looks great. I think it's very it's a beautiful magazine.
It is. Oh,
oh,
so
everyone's
cute.
got a copy.
It's better.
So
Yeah, so
you
yeah.
can get it at Belfast Photo Festival at the Botanical Gardens, I believe, Michael.
Yes, you can. Yes, that's right.
And on your website and on our website. I mean, if you're in the UK, it's a better idea probably to buy it from Belfast. This way you don't have to pay customs. And if you're in mainland Europe and the rest of the world, go for it.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to our audience for joining us. Bye.